I want to start with a pattern, not a political opinion, not a cultural debate. A pattern that repeats across history, across religions, across political systems. When societies begin to destabilize economically, institutionally, or psychologically, power structures almost always become preoccupied with sex. Not policy, not material conditions, not governance. No. Sex, gender, morality, purity, who is acceptable, who is not. And this fixation does not appear at the beginning of authoritarian movements. It appears later on, when legitimacy weakens and control becomes harder to maintain. So what I want to do here is walk through why this happens psychologically and why these debates are not cultural side quests but indicators of a systemic stress. Human beings do not tolerate prolonged uncertainty well. No. When economic systems feel unstable, when institutions lose credibility, when the future becomes unpredictable, people experience chronic background anxiety. That anxiety needs an outlet. If it stays diffuse, it turns into apathy, withdrawal, or despair, none of which are useful to power. So failing systems externalize anxiety. Instead of saying, this system is not working, they redirect attention towards something has corrupted us. And that something is almost always embodied. Historically, the targets are consistent. People whose bodies don't conform, people whose sexuality is visible, people whose identities blur categories, people who don't participate in prescribed family structures. Bodies are easier to attack than systems, don't you think? From a psychological standpoint, this is displacement. When a threat is too large, abstract, or powerful to confront directly, the brain redirects fear toward a target that feels visible and controllable. You cannot fight inflation. You cannot argue with structural inequality. You cannot confront institutional decay directly. But you can confront a person, a group, a body. Authoritarian movements do not reduce fear. They aim it. Moral panics are not organic cultural moments. They are mechanisms for emotional redirection. Sex in particular becomes an ideal control level, not because it is uniquely dangerous, no, but because it already carries social regulation. Sex sits at the intersection of identity, pleasure, shame, and power. That means authority doesn't need to invent new rules. It only needs to intensify existing ones. When systems regulate sexuality, 3 psychological shifts occur altogether. First, people learn to override instinct. Second, people internalize surveillance. They monitor themselves. And third, obedience becomes tied to identity rather than their behavior. Let me explain. This distinction matters. If you break a rule, you can question the rule. If you are framed as the problem, questioning becomes self-attack. This is how shame replaces enforcement. Instead of asking, is this fair? Who benefits? Who decides this? People start asking, what's wrong with me? Am I normal? Am I allowed? Sexual shame is especially effective because it attaches to the body and feels permanent. Once control reaches the body, it no longer requires constant policing. This is also why systems under stress react strongly to ambiguity. Authoritarian psychology is characterized by rigid categorization, intolerance of ambiguity, and discomfort with irony and symbolic play. Anything that destabilizes fixed roles, gendered, social, or hierarchical, becomes threatening. not because it causes harm, but because it exposes the constructed nature of authority. When people see that roles are enforced rather than natural, obedience weakens. And this brings us to women's bodies. Across history, reproductive control escalates precisely when systems feel unstable. This is not primarily ideological, but it is logistical. Women represent continuity, reproduction, the future. When institutions feel out of control, controlling women's bodies creates an illusion of stabilizing time itself. Why choice becomes framed as danger, why motherhood is politicized. This pattern is consistent across cultures and eras. It is not tradition, it is response to a systemic threat. From crisis psychology, we know this pattern quite well. When control over institutions is lost, authority seeks control over bodies. Bodies respond, institutions do not. This does not resolve instability. It temporarily restores the feeling of control. That feeling is often enough to maintain authority in the short term. Historically, this sequence is reliable. Economic stress intensifies, legitimacy weakens, moral narratives harden, sexual regulation escalates. At that point, systems are no longer managing material reality. They are managing emotion. As political theorist Hannah Arendt observed, fear replaces thought long before overt repression becomes visible. Moral obsession is not strength, it's a signal. So when sexual regulation becomes central to political identity, it's not because leaders suddenly care about morality. It's because something else is failing and cannot be addressed directly. That is the pattern. That's the psychology. And that's why these debates keep appearing at the same historical moment again and again and again and again. But you tell me what you think about all this. I hope I'm not boring you with any of my videos. Please like and subscribe. I'm trying to keep it under 8 minutes so you guys don't get bored, but please tell me if you want longer videos. I'll do those as well. Thank you.